What is the most regrettable sex you've had? Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. Alright. My now ex-girlfriend wanted to have a three-way with one of her best childhood friends and I. Her friend is frigging smoking hot. We book a room at a hotel for the hell of it and arrange to meet after we were all done with work and school at about 5 p.m. rush hour. So me and her friend arrive at the place around the same time, and I get a text from my ex saying she's stuck in traffic. I couldn't help myself, and long story short, she walked in on me banging her friend against the wall. Needless to say, we broke up that night, and I ruined their friendship. I basically took one of the best situations a man can be in and ruined it. Fought with the head that didn't have a brain and screwed everything up. Story 2. For almost a year after our divorce, my ex and I continued to sleep together. We were both hesitant to navigate the challenges of finding new relationships, especially as single people in our late 40s. Unfortunately, the dynamic between us remained largely the same. We continued to argue, just as we had before the divorce, and the intimacy lacked the connection and joy it once had when we genuinely cared for each other. This arrangement ended up slowing down our healing process and kept us both stuck in old patterns. It's taken nearly 3 years, but I'm finally starting to move forward and truly let go of that chapter of my life. Story 3. I once agreed to go on a date with a man who had a bit of an aging hipster vibe and bore a resemblance to Kip from Napoleon Dynamite, both in looks and mannerisms. I wasn't particularly drawn to him, but feeling lonely and still reeling from heartbreak, I convinced myself to give it a chance. After having quite a bit to drink, I rationalized that he was nice enough, maybe even a bit funny, and hoped that perhaps he'd be good enough in bed for me to overlook the fact that I just couldn't make myself attracted to him. He put on this weird, sad, robot music, turned on a red light bulb, and then proceeded to slobber all over me, while trying to do me to the beat of the song. As things escalated, it became clear he was completely immersed in the moment, but I felt the opposite, disconnected and uncomfortable. It was like a bad acid trip. I remember looking up at him on top of me, and just wishing I could disappear forever. Story 4. I once had three-way with my friend and his girlfriend. I'd had way too much to drink, and she was hot. I ate her pie while she was giving him the J, and afterward, I finished and went to chill on the couch. It went from fun to super awkward in minus 4.2 seconds. Looking back, I regret it. Their relationship ended not long after, and my friendship with him dissolved as well. Later, when I met my future wife, he demanded a go at her, which was completely unacceptable. My response was a clear and definite no. Before you ask, no sword touching, and no Eiffel Tower happened that night. Story 5. I once had an encounter with someone who was a virgin and came from a religious background. I found the situation difficult because he seemed very innocent and unsure about what was happening. It felt strange, almost as if I was taking advantage of his inexperience. He seemed overwhelmed, like someone who had encountered something completely unfamiliar. I tried to make it work for an hour, but eventually we both stopped, as it just wasn't working. Story 6. I had an encounter with someone I had been casually seeing, but this time he was really drunk. Throughout the whole situation, he kept talking about how he wanted to do all these other girls and kept bugging me to invite a friend to join. It really turned me off, so I stopped and left. Hands down my most regretted segs yet. Story 7. It was the end of high school, and I had just gone through a breakup. Not because there wasn't love, but because of circumstances. My ex started dating a friend of mine, which was tough, as you can imagine. I had been flirting with a girl who seemed interested in getting closer, hoping it would help me move on from my ex. We ended up being intimate, but it wasn't a good experience. She seemed distant, and it left me feeling unfulfilled. Then came the part one really regret. She and her friends decided to play a prank on me. I was about to move abroad for my studies, and they didn't like that I wouldn't be staying in the US. So, she told me she was pregnant. I was devastated, filled with fear, shame, and anxiety. I even thought about canceling my trip, but she encouraged me to go. For months after, I stayed in constant contact with her, making sure she was okay, even though I had no idea what was really going on. After about 7 months, she finally admitted that it had all been a lie, a joke. I felt betrayed and hurt. The emotional toll it took on me, worrying, sleepless nights, constant anxiety, was overwhelming, all for something that wasn't even real. That experience has really impacted how I trust people now. I find it hard to let others in, and dating has become a challenge, as I often struggle with anxiety. I hope they all enjoyed their joke. That sucks. My friend went through a similar predicament, except the girl was actually pregnant. For months she tormented him, and then the baby was born, and there was no way it could have been his, but she had everyone on her side. He said, "F this," and leaves to start a new life. Kid looked nothing like him, and he was fairly confident that the math didn't add up right anyways. Still, he was harassed, emotionally tormented, and couldn't even come to his hometown to visit family and friends without her finding out. It didn't stop until he finally met the girl's parents, who had never even seen a picture of him, and so were on their daughter's side this whole time. The meeting changed everything because the parents realized that their daughter was an idiot and some sort of crazy. Still, there was 3 years of fear and depression that I had to help him deal with. Story 8. My first experience is probably one of my biggest regrets. There was mutual attraction between me and this girl, but she had a boyfriend, and I never wanted to be involved in a situation like that. Eventually, they broke up, and she reached out to me. We ended up being intimate, and afterward, we had a conversation about how she wasn't looking for anything serious, which I was okay with. We set some boundaries. She didn't want me to tell anyone about it, and I asked her not to get involved with a friend of mine. I had some insecurities at the time. A week later, she went on a date with that friend, and they ended up being in a relationship for over a year. It was a difficult time for me. Story 9. I ended up bringing someone home for a casual encounter. As things started, I realized she was on her period. I decided to go for it anyways because there's a girl in my bed. I did not realize how much of a mess it was going to be. Things got pretty messy, and I found it difficult to stay comfortable as it became more overwhelming. It felt awkward, and I realized that both of us in the room had gotten pretty messy. In the end, I just finished just for the sake of it. Afterward, I had to clean up and take a few showers, as well as throw out my sheets and towels. Story 10. My ex hated segs, so I wasn't getting any regardless. The foreplay starts in the morning with acts of service BS. One morning, among many, I woke up early and cleaned the house. Our son started crying, so I took him downstairs to take care of him while I cleaned. I cleaned the kitchen, bathrooms, living room, dusted, vacuumed, etc. Then I made breakfast. I am guilty in that I always instigated/initiated segs, since she literally never would. She comes down, "Oh, you were just doing this since you want segs later." Instant deflation. I power on anyway and get the entire place in order. After I finished cleaning, I got ready and I left for work. After work, I was taking some night classes at the university, and I had about 40 minutes between work and first class. So I took some money I had saved from donating plasma, trying to pay down the credit card debt that was sprung on me first month after we were married, and I buy her flowers. She was visiting her mom. I get home from school and put the flowers on the table, hoping to surprise her. She gets home, sees the flowers, and says, I quote, "Oh, you bought me flowers. Why haven't you done the dishes?" Literally in the same breath/sentence. Her voice went from somewhat sweet to annoyed. I go to school. I come back later, and she is watching American Idol, and our son is asleep. I start homework. She then said she was going to bed and to come up for the nightly prayer. We pray. She goes and lays down, and I finish my homework. I come up, brush my teeth, and get in PJs and lay next to her. We hadn't had segs for 2 months up to that point. So yeah, I'm a guy with a segs drive. Sue me. I roll over and kiss her neck. She rolls over and away. All right, I got the hint, so I roll back over and am about to close my eyes, and I hear, "Hey, you want to have segs?" I replied, yes. Then she asks, "How's the porn problem?" Backstory. One particular Sunday, the leader of our faith was flipping out about the evils of porn and the destruction it's wreaking on the family. We had segs about 20 times the first year of marriage, which is far from adequate. As you can guess, my wife wasn't much into doing it from the start of our marriage. So I looked at porn online literally 2 days before that Sunday, the first time ever in the marriage. She questioned me on it, and I wasn't going to lie to my eternal companion, so I told her. What was infrequent became close to nothing after that. So I replied, "Gosh, I'm good. I haven't looked at it. Whatever. Have a good night." I roll back over to my side of the bed. Then she said, "Fine, get it over with." So, not sure if it was spite, frustration, hate, or what, but I was like, you know what? F it. And I did it. Worst segs ever. Life is too short. We are divorced now. Story 11. Took a girl home and went down on her gladly until she came. She lay there, enjoying her post-orgasmic bliss, oblivious to me. I kept hinting, and she wasn't picking up on it, so I asked her nicely if she would reciprocate. She's like, "I can't." I was confused. I'm like, "What? Why not?" In this perky voice, she told me, "I'm Catholic. We don't do that." Afterwards, I was still nice to her and even made her a killer sandwich. I mean, really killer. I was proud of that sandwich. She wouldn't say anything, so I asked her how it was. She acted like it was a weird thing to ask and said patronizingly, "Yep, it's a sandwich." My friend who lived across the hall screwed her sister the same night. the sister that I had always wanted to hook up with. He totally got the best of that deal. Story 12. I was definitely someone's worst. I found out my girlfriend had been sleeping with this other dude who ran in our circle. Today they are married. I broke up with her, and because I was super butthurt, I went drinking and brought home, actually my parents' house, a slam piece. So we're in my room, making out and being loud and drunk, when my sister starts pounding on the wall from bedroom next to mine. I ignore her. She then bursts into my room, crying hysterically. She thinks I'm cheating, telling me to go to bed. I'm belligerent at this point, so I start freaking over her intrusion. She eventually leaves and the girl, and I start making out again. As we're kissing, I start to puke, all over her and the carpeted floor. My mom then comes into the room. The girl is hiding under the sheets at this point, but her feet are sticking out. My mom sees and asks, and I quote, "Who's the hussy?" I hear the girl sigh with regret as she sticks a hand out and waves. Mom leaves. I beg the girl to stay and keep going. She does. We have the worst awkward segs. Rubber keeps falling off because of my whiskey D. Then I passed out. Kim, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. Story 13. My first year of grad school in DC. I was fresh out of a really shitty, addictive, and intense 2-year relationship with a girl who turned out to be straight anyway. So I was more than ready to hook up freely. Another girl in my program was this smoking hot blonde, who we will call CJ, who if you looked at her was stereotypically gay, butch with spiky blonde hair. But because I was a dumb F, I just didn't see that over the next 3 months she was messing with me. We'd make plans and she'd blow it off, etc. Then one night I'm sitting in my apartment alone. It's around midnight, and I get a text from CJ that's basically a booty call. The usual, "Hey, what are you up to? Want to hang out?" Hell yeah, I want to hang out. So I put my shit together and get all spruced up and drag my butt across town, all the way into Northeast because finally I'm going to hit this. So I get there, she lets me in, gets me a beer, all going well. We pretend to watch a movie, and I keep trying to make out with her with little success. I'm starting to get annoyed and kind of sleepy, and finally she tells me to stay over and we go to her bedroom. Just when I'm thinking that my charm has paid off, I find I am in a surreal horror show. She has a twin bed that covered top to bottom in teddy bears, mostly Beanie Babies. I stand in confusion while she lovingly removes each one and sets them on a stand in the same order they were on her bed. So I work my way to the bed and we lay down and start fooling around when I notice right above her bed is a pretty large crucifix, which in itself isn't an issue, but this one is literally the most graphic, gory, and terrifying look to it that I have ever seen. Blood dripping from him, every muscle and wound perfectly carved and painted. And of course he has piercing eyes. Eyes that are staring at me, unblinking, as I am engaging in unsatisfying lesbian segs right in front of him. I can't look away. I can't break eye contact. CJ is frigging terrible in bed. He just won't stop staring at me. The frigging teddy bears are staring at me. I get her off and then try to roll to the side to arrange for her to return the favor. Oh no, she says, "That's it. I'm Christian, so I don't do that on people. I just let cute girls do me." That's basically word for word. At this point, I give up and let her go to sleep, at which point I realize I need a rapid exit strategy. She had a basement apartment, and so with more than a little agility, I climbed up her wall, forced open the window, and dragged myself up out onto the street. It was 6 a.m. at this point. I had no money, and since I was pretty new in town, I had no friends to call of the sort that would rescue me at 6 a.m. So, being still 21, pretty young really, and having no one else to call, I called my mom and walked back to my DuPont apartment, cold, alone, and still horny. Story 14. Now I can finally tell this story. I met this guy at a party, we'll call him C. He seemed very cool, and had just a bit of a southern accent. I pretty much spent the whole party talking to him. We laughed, and drank, and smoked, and laughed more. It was great. So, a few weeks later, we actually go out on a date, drink at a local bar. I show up, and he's already there, which is nice. But the magic we seemed to have at the party was nowhere to be found. The conversation was stilted and awkward. He talked a lot about the girl he had just gotten out of a 7-year relationship with back in Georgia. But I'd had a few, and he was hot. So when he suggested we go back his place, I thought, why the hell not? We get back to his place and are making out, which is nice, but that's when things pretty much started to fall apart. The guy is pawing at my knockers, like he's never seen a pair before. He takes his shirt off, and he's thin but pretty hairy, which normally is fine with me. But his body hair was coarse and thick and very odd-looking. I started to think to myself, this is kind of like doing it with a bear, due to the hairiness and the pawing. Then when he went down, he clearly had no idea what the hell he was doing. He basically just slobbered all over my junk, nowhere near the button. I tried to guide him, both verbally and by shifting my body, but he was resistant to any suggestion. Then, he tried to put it in without a rubber, an absolute no-no for me, especially with random dudes I meet at parties. I pretty much had to demand that he use one, and he got all but hurt about it. I don't know why I didn't leave right then, but I wouldn't have had to wait long, since he lasted literally 3 thrusts and done. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt by trying again in the morning, and nope, again, 3 thrusts and done. I left and never spoke to him again. I now refer to him as the bear slug, as doing it with him was simultaneously like being mauled by a bear and attacked by a slug. Definitely most regrettable segs. Edit. I stayed due to having too many drinks to drive home safely, and I was trying to give the poor guy the benefit of the doubt. I should have just left and called a cab, but we all make bad decisions when we're a bit hammered and haven't had segs in 6 months, right? Story 15. I had just broken up with my boyfriend of nearly a year and a half. He had never treated me well, he never took any initiative to make plans. He ditched me when I'd made plans, he made me feel like I didn't exist when we weren't actually together. And on top of this, never was able to say he loved me, despite me saying it to him at 6 months. Finally, I'd had enough, and I broke it off. And not even a week later, he's tearfully confessing his love for me, blah blah. Whatever. Way too frigging late, a-hole. So I'm emotionally exhausted, angry, and heartbroken. I'm a modern dancer, and I was performing about a week after the breakup, and he decided to still come see me, bring me flowers and a card, things he never once did while we were dating. And it pisses me off even more. So when the cast party rolls around, I'm ready to get good and drunk. I end up meeting this guy, who is in town dancing with another company, who were sharing our cast party. I'd seen him hitting on pretty much every other lady there before me, but I was wasted and angry, so I decided I'd go for it. Screw my ex. I'm ready to forget him. Ends up being the worst eggs ever. The guy is not well endowed, which wouldn't be a problem if he knew what he was doing. But sadly, it was just boring in and out, no rhythm changes, no attempt to stimulate any other part of me. Practically the same position for almost 2.5 hours. I would have been impressed with his stamina if I wasn't on the verge of falling asleep the whole time. And when 5 a.m. rolled around and I told him, I'm done, I need to sleep, I have dance again tomorrow, he just wouldn't let up. I turned away and tried to close my eyes and ignore him, but literally every 10 minutes he was pushing his D into my back trying to get me to go for some more, and no matter how many times I told him no, he just kept trying. It made me so uncomfortable, and I was so glad when he left around 9 a.m. to catch a flight back to his hometown. I wish it had ended there, but at some point in the drunken night, I'd given him my Facebook info, so the next day, he sent me around 8 very desperate-sounding messages before I finally replied. I told him we should just be friends, but he wouldn't hear it and kept telling me he missed me, getting all sappy and offended, almost pissed when I said all I wanted was to be friends. Eventually, I got fed up and told him, you don't know me, you can't miss me, and I'm fairly certain you just miss having someone to stick your D in. I was a one-night stand, don't pretend I mean so much to you. And then I blocked him. So the segs itself sucked, and then he was a weird Facebook creeper after, and I had to block him. Thank God he's not actually from my city. Story 16. When I was in high school, I had my first real girlfriend. In middle school and before, I had had a few short relationships that lasted between a couple weeks to a couple months. So when I had my first real girlfriend, I was head over heels in love. You know when you fall for someone, how they completely consume your life. That's what it was like for me. I thought about her all the time. Literally the first thing I would do in the morning was grab my phone and send her a happy, good morning, I dreamed about you last night text. My grades dropped, not drastically, but enough that I fell from being salutatorian to barely in the top 3% of my class, which was a big deal in my high school. My relationship with my family, which was always a little strained but loving and caring, deteriorated because I would rather spend time with her than with my parents or my sisters. The thing is, our families didn't like each other. Like, not even a little bit. I'm really not sure why, even to this day. I know it has something to do with my grandfather, who was a high-ranking officer in the Taiwanese army. He fought on the side of the nationalists during the Chinese Civil War, and when communists took over, he was forced out under threat of torture/death. My girlfriend's family, on the complete other hand, were utterly communist. It's difficult to explain, and the way I'm describing it makes it sound very petty and lame, but the rift between our families was really severe and was a huge issue. Nevertheless, my girlfriend and I didn't care about the ROC/PRO conflict and only cared about each other. Against our respective families' wishes, we began dating. Eventually, as we were young and foolish, we took our relationship to the next level and had sex. We didn't use protection. She became pregnant. Despite how young we were, despite the fact that we hadn't finished high school, yet alone gotten a college degree, or even found a job, we decided to keep the baby. We were so in love. Nothing was going to stop us from having a family. We weren't blind. We knew that it was going to be very tough on us, and that we were going to be looked down upon or disowned from our very traditional families. But we didn't care. We were in love. For some reason, we kept the pregnancy secret. My parents didn't know. Her parents didn't know. My grandfather probably would have had a heart attack if he knew. The only person in our families that knew was my little sister, who supported our relationship at the outrage of my parents. What we were thinking, I don't know. It's not like we were going to be able to deny it once her belly became so big. We were still living in our parents' houses. Then, the worst day of my life occurred when she was 3 months pregnant. I can remember everything in vivid detail. We were in school, walking to class, holding hands and being happy when she stumbled. I looked at her. Her hands squeezed mine as tight as I can ever remember. Her eyes rolled upwards. She gasped. She fell. I remember collapsing by her, throwing my binder to the same and clutching her face while teachers ran towards us while others kept the students from stepping on her. I remember waiting by her side when the ambulance came. I remember sitting by her when she woke up. I remember when her parents came to see us, with crazed eyes of equal parts concern and rage. I remember when the doctor came in and told us all that my girlfriend had had a miscarriage. The next thing I remember was my girlfriend's father's face in front of mine, screaming at me in a jumbled barrage of broken English and Chinese, while my girlfriend and her mother cried. He ended up literally shoving me out of the room, and that was the last time I saw her. It's not like she died or anything. Her parents just refused to let her see me. After getting out of the hospital and dealing with a nosocomial infection, she transferred schools, and their family moved away after graduation. The only information I ever found out about her after was from a mutual friend, who coincidentally went to college in the same town that they moved to. Last I heard, she's healthy again, but has a haunted look on her face. She started doing drugs and was kicked out by her parents. I tried looking out for her, but I was never able to contact her. It's funny, looking back at things with full hindsight vision, when I'm able to see what a complete and utter idiot I was, but this experience is something that I look back upon both fondly and in horror. So, the most regrettable segs I've ever had was my first time, when I got a girl pregnant, permanently screwed up her family, and probably ruined her life. Story 17. I went on a date with a guy I met online. He ended up sending me years-old photos, and instead of the somewhat husky guy I was expecting, I got what amounted to Peter Griffin, except more so. Guy was tipping the scales at 350 pounds. I suffered through dinner with him, and he practically inhaled everything. It was a little weird watching him eat. Anyways, afterwards he asked if I want to go for a drive with him. My brain said no, but I think for the first time and only time ever, my brain was short-circuited by my D. It was a 2-year dry spell, so that didn't help. I agree, and we drive up into the woods, and we pull in somewhere. We chat for a bit, and I find myself totally unimpressed with this dude. He was 26, and it was his mother's Volvo station wagon. Well, he gets out, lifts the gate, and invites me out back. I oblige, and we start. I'll give him one thing. He gave decent head. Well, I go to return the favor, and I have to find his parrot, which was an adventure in itself. I pretty much turned on to autopilot at this point. I went to give him head in return, but he was uncut and admitted he hadn't had a thorough cleaning. This was the only point in my life I wanted to gag from something so foul-tasting. He tells me to roll over, and I oblige. I never thought I would have to fake my own enjoyment. I kept watching the clock on the dash waiting for this to end. Well, he finished and I zoned out until I got to my car. I raced home, smoking I think half a pack of cigarettes in the process. It was a 15-minute drive. When I got home, I had a lovely, gigantic purple bruise on my thighs, and I later learned that the guy was so small in fact, the rubber got lost inside and I didn't find that until a few hours later. Ever since, I've always thought with my big head, even if I am running dry. Story 18. I went to a concert this past September, and since it was about a 3-hour drive back to my college apartment, I opted to stay with a cousin of mine who I'm pretty close to. Now cousin, let's call her M, has told me about her roommate, let's call her T. A couple times prior, I know from her description she's entitled, dirty, constantly gives M shit for being small and skinny, which she is. M is all of 5 feet 2 inches and maybe 100 pounds, etc. Generic horrible female roommate. Anyways, I digress. I had prearranged with M to meet at a pub across the street from the concert venue and pound some beers and watch UFC before crashing at her apartment for the night. So I go to the concert and have a blast, Silosis, after the burial, Devil Driver, and Trivium. I get drunk and blow my eardrums out, and my neck hurts from headbanging, but it's a great time to be had. Everything so far is to plan. Now when I get to the pub, M sees me immediately. I'm tall as shit and flags me down. I walk over and on the way, I catch sight of M, her boyfriend, a total bro, and what I presume to be T, given her previous descriptions. I wasn't expecting anyone else besides my cousin, so I was surprised but just kept on because F it, new people are cool, right? T turns out to be every bit as horrible in person as M described her. Whiny and entitled to the nines. Constantly interrupting conversations, interjecting idiotic thoughts, shit that makes absolutely zero sense, etc. I ordered food at the bar because I hadn't eaten in 8 or so hours, and she's swiping food off my plate and expecting me to buy her drinks because I'm a dude. Whatever, I haven't seen him in a year. You can't ruin this. Eventually the fights finish. We're all good and drunk, start bar hopping in downtown Big City X, and end up back at M's place when the night is finished. M pops in a movie, and she and A both fall asleep. Now it's just T and myself. Now pretty much every moment prior to this, T hadn't shied away from trying to lay her best game on me, trying to play coy by saying I wasn't enough of a man to handle a real woman. All that BS. I'd up to that point successfully spurned every advance with completely zero interest. But now that M isn't there to keep me safe, T frigging pounces. Before I knew it, we're in her bed, and I'm going, what the F just happened? But screw it, I'm 22 and horny, so I go to town. It was hands down the worst segs I've ever had. She expected me to do all the work, refused to perform even the most basic foreplay, basically expected me to be falling over myself trying to get inside her. Whatever. It was bad, but I did it anyway because I'm 22 and was drunk and hadn't had segs in a few months. I woke up the next morning and I vanished the F out of there before anyone wakes up. By the time M realizes what happened, I'm 2 hours down the road and never to return as long as T lives there. She apologizes. Silver lining? And got me a bottle of Belvedere for Christmas. Story 19. My wife has been navigating depression, which affects many aspects of her life, including her desire for intimacy. I love and admire her deeply. She is incredibly talented and capable in countless ways. She has been putting genuine effort into working through both the depression and our intimacy struggles. But the reality of her sensitivity due to mental health challenges means I must be constantly mindful of my words and actions. Even small missteps can have a significant impact, leaving her feeling low for days. Meanwhile, I find myself yearning for physical closeness and connection, and it's been a challenging journey reconciling our different levels of desire. There was a night when she approached me, wanting to try being intimate again, hoping to rediscover connection. It had been some time since our last attempt. However, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, and despite knowing this wasn't likely to end well, I felt I couldn't turn her down without hurting her further. Our initial efforts were awkward. She seemed to be going through the motions rather than enjoying it. I tried to engage and create closeness, but she struggled to respond and even winced in discomfort at times. When she yawned and apologized, it was clear she was pushing herself purely out of determination, not genuine desire. As we continued, I felt deeply conflicted, knowing she was trying her best, but also aware neither of us was finding real joy. My own feelings were clouded by concern for her well-being. In the past, I've tried stepping back when intimacy felt wrong, but that left her feeling even more vulnerable and hurt. So, I continued, hoping to reassure her, despite how disconnected everything felt. Eventually, we concluded the experience, but the emotional aftermath lingered. When she wanted to discuss what happened, I tried to be honest but careful, explaining that seeing her struggle made it difficult to fully enjoy the moment. I suggested we try again when she felt more rested, but despite my best intentions, my words triggered a wave of self-doubt and sadness for her. I know this journey won't be easy, but my commitment to my wife and our relationship is unwavering. We're both learning, trying, and hoping to find better ways to connect that honor where we each are emotionally and physically. It's not the picture-perfect scenario, but it's a part of our story, and I want to continue building it together with patience, love, and mutual understanding. Thank you for watching. If you have your worst sex stories, let us know in the comments below, and be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.